I have this problem where whenever I read a book, I immediately forget everything that happens in it. And I think that part of it has to do with the fact that I don't write down what I feel about the book or write down a rating or review. So I wanted to start a little digital library just for me so that I can remember the things that I read um, and keep a record of how I felt when I read them, after I read them. So this is the first one that I'm doing, and it's for the book Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. This book was lent to me by a friend. Shout out Soupy. It was so good. This was probably one of my first 5-star reads this year. And I think that's only due to the fact that I've just been rereading a lot of books this year. And I've been trying to get into all of the young adult books that I missed reading when I was in middle school. So apart from that, this book was a 5 stars for me. It's about a man named Jason Desson. He was a physicist and a really good one, but he decides to leave his passion to start a family because he ends up having a kid. And so he gets married and he has a kid and he's living a very happy and content life. But then one night he gets kidnapped and he's knocked out, and when he wakes up, it turns out that he's not married and he doesn't have a kid. And it's really, really interesting because this book, it gives you a lot to think about because it's not very black and white. There are many books out there, I know. I haven't read that many, but there are many books out there with the same sort of premise where something happens and the character wakes up and their life isn't what they were used to. It's different from what they were living. But the thing that stood out about this book is that it introduced the concept of the multiverse. Now, if you're watching this, if you're actually watching this, if you don't want spoilers, let me give a review before I go deeper into this book. This book was amazing. I read it so fast. I read it in 2 days, and it was, I don't think I've ever done this before. I read the first half in one sitting and the second half in one sitting. So I literally sat down and finished this book in maybe like 5 hours, less than 5 hours maybe total. It was so good. I flew through it. The imagery is beautiful. The writing is amazing. It's so simple, but it's very captivating. Like, even if you flip through the pages, you're like, oh, these sentences are so short. It's like one-word lines and dialogues that just flow. It's amazing. I love it. And I need to read more from this author. I know that he has a really famous trilogy. I'm not sure what it's about, and I don't remember what it's called, but I will be checking it out. And also, I really liked it because the setting is in Chicago, so it felt, kind of local, even though I've never been to Logan Square before. It was just nice. I'm talking about the L and stuff. I'm like, oh, that's my city. But it was a very, very good book. It gave you a lot to think about. There was many times where I just had to sit down and stare at the wall and gather my thoughts and try to navigate the story because there were some intense parts. And I love science fiction. I think in the category of fiction, my 2 favorites are science fiction and historical fiction because there's always something to learn and there's always something to think about, and there's just so much knowledge in both of those genres. But I really, really recommend this book. It was such a fast read and it was a very interesting read. The pages kept turning, honestly. I could have finished this in one sitting if I had the time, but it was beautiful. Anyways, now if you don't want spoilers, end it now. So yeah, as I was saying before, anything that has to do with the multiverse is just so interesting to me immediately because that's the one concept in science that I'm really drawn to. I'm not a big science person. I really love science. I was never really good at it, but it was always really interesting. And so physics was an interesting concept in theory, but I really, really sucked at it. And like basic physics was just so bad. This is why I'm not an engineer. But once you get to talking about theoretical stuff, it's just so interesting to like listen and learn about. And so with this book, it was a mix of both just physics and I guess I'd say like the philosophy of life. That sounds really deep, and it kind of is, because in this book, Jason really navigates like life in a broader sense, if that makes sense. Like, you really get to see how your life, I'm just really explaining this really badly, but it's like you only get one life, and every decision you make is final. You don't get another shot at life. And the biggest takeaway from this book was that you just have to live in the moment and enjoy what you have. And like take what you can, because you don't get another life. You don't get a second chance. Because once you make a decision, it's done. That's it. You don't get to go back and change it. You don't get to change the past. You can only change your future. And this really puts that into words. It puts it into like this fictional way to kind of visualize how lucky you are to even live the life that you were living. I think I need to go more into depth about what this book is about for that to actually make sense of what happens in here. Basically, Jason gets kidnapped by himself, and he wakes up in a parallel universe where he is like a prize award-winning super intelligent physicist who had figured out a way to basically travel through the multiverse. The one thing about books that talk about the multiverse is that there's always going to be plot holes. Like, there's never not going to be plot holes in science fiction, because you're working with things that aren't proven, that don't make sense, because half of it's not true, half of it hasn't been discovered. And so for a actual physicist, like, this whole book would have been like a little bit like, that's not how this works. But like for just a reader who, has like basic scientific knowledge, it's so interesting because the plot holes you just glaze over them. And for me, I think it's so much more fun to speculate through the plot holes. That's something I always like to do, especially through the multiverse. I like to figure out and think through the plot holes, just to see oh, this is why this wouldn't work, but this is why this works, and stuff like that. It just adds a separate challenge. But the thing with this is that it really focused on the whole your decisions are final part in life. Basically, Jason in this world was an award-winning physicist. He was super smart. He figured out how to travel the multiverse, but in order to become such a successful man, he turned down the option to settle down and have a family, because in this life, him and his wife, her name is Daniela, don't end up getting married. She does not keep the baby. I don't think she even had a baby in the first place. But she was a very good artist, a very, very talented artist, who in the original Jason's current life, she did not follow through with because she had a child. But in this universe, she was really famous and she was very talented. And both her and Jason were very successful, but they were apart. And I guess the Jason in that world was jealous. Not jealous, I think he just had an emptiness in his life because he chose his profession and passion over love. And so when he went through this portal to go into a different universe, he found one where he was genuinely happy and he was content in his life and he was with the love of his life, which drove him to kidnap the Jason in that world and switch spots with him, basically. And that probably doesn't make a lot of sense. You have to read it. But this whole thing follows Jason, the one who was married and had a kid, follows Jason trying to get back to his original universe. Because he didn't sign up for this. He woke up into this new universe. He had no idea what was going on. He had no idea where his wife and kid were, and he just wanted to go home. So him and one lady, his so-called therapist in that universe, go back into this box that transports you into different universes, and they're trying to find their way back into his original life. And so the thing with the multiverse is that there's an infinite number of universes. That's the basic theory, is that every single decision, every second, every millisecond, every fraction of a time, a new timeline is being branched, a new universe is being made just by a split-second decision. There's thousands and thousands of universes theoretically branching off of this point from where I'm making this video. Like, there's so many other universes where I could be saying different things. I could have a different room. I could not have it be making this video. It's really insane. The concept is incredible. But in the book, Jason is trying to navigate all this infinite number of universes, but his only goal is that he wants to get back to his wife. And it's so interesting because the way that this concept is presented in this book, it's very easy to just realize how scary that is and how much your one life and your decisions matter so much in life. The basic premise of this book is that when they were in this little box that transports you into a different universe, they take this drug, and basically the science behind it, the way they explained it, is that if you were able to get into a box like Schrodinger's cat without having any external observation, you could theoretically superposition yourself into a different plane. And the reason why this is impossible is that for Schrodinger's experiment to actually work, there should be no outsider observation happening at all inside the little box where the cat and the poison is supposed to be. Go search up the Schrodinger's cat if you don't know what I'm talking about, because Google probably explains it way better than I would. But so he finds out, okay, theoretically, if you put a human into this box where nobody can observe you from the outside, you should theoretically be able to access a bunch of different universes, because nothing is tangible, nothing is true, nothing becomes until somebody perceives it. Something only exists if it's being perceived. And so now if you put a human into that box, that wouldn't exactly work, because a human is also an observant and they're observing their situation around them. So in this book, they figure out a drug that will inhibit something in your brain that allows you to observe something in real time and to perceive real things. And so what happens is that they inject themselves with this drug that lasts about an hour, and they go into this box and all they see is this never-ending hallway of doors. And each door is a portal, basically, into a new universe that is just simultaneous with the one you came from. You're not moving through the past or the future. It's just all stacked into one, not the same plane, but they're all the same time. Everything is happening at the same time. It's just there's different circumstances. And so if I were in that box, I could open a door to this exact date, exact time, but maybe the whole world's on fire. Or maybe I'm sitting downstairs in my room doing this in the living room instead of up here. Or maybe my entire room is black and I'm actually like a goth or something. You know, there's just like an infinite amount of possibilities, but it's just in the same time, because you can't move forward or backward in time. And so the whole premise of this book is that you and only you can create your own world. In the world that you're present in, you are the only one that can make decisions throughout your life. You are the only person who is steering your life, and that is final. Once you make a decision, that is final. And through the multiverse, there was an interesting concept in it where what you manifested is what came in front of you. So when Jason was trying to get back to his world, he opened so many doors to so many of these universes. It was insane. The first world they opened up into, I think it was the first one, was Chicago entirely covered in a snowstorm. And they were really confused, like, how this happened. And they figured out it was because the woman who he was traveling with, her name's Amanda, just a few minutes ago, she talked about how, oh, this is a possibility that, like, there could be a really bad snowstorm and, like, an entire universe could end because it like froze or something. And so when they opened that door, that's what manifested into that universe. So what they figured out is that what you put out into the world is what you get. And so at one point, Jason opens a door and it's like there's an apocalypse. His wife and kid died of this disease, this horrible disease. And they later figure out that he had this fear in the back of his mind that he was destined to become alone through the same way that his mother died, because previously his mother had died of an illness. And so in the back of his mind, in his subconscious, this is what he was always afraid of in his life, that people would leave him through sickness continuously. And that's what he manifested. And it really makes you think, like, this really relates to my own life. Like, that made me think this really relates to my own life, because I'm big on manifestation, and I really believe that what you keep in your subconscious is what you accidentally manifest into your life. And so if you keep telling yourself good affirmations, if you keep reminding yourself of goals and you stick that into your subconscious, then that's what will manifest into your life. But if you have this fear and if you have doubt and if you keep that in the back of your brain, that's just what's going to present in front of you. And this book did a beautiful way of describing that feeling. But it also was kind of tragic because Jason, he doesn't benefit from this, obviously, because his stakes are higher. What happens is that he figures out that what he manifests will present into a new universe, and so he's trying to get back to his own world. So he's trying his hardest to, focus on what he looked like, what his family looked like, what his Chicago looked like, trying to get back to his own world. But the thing is that Amanda had gotten attached to Jason, and subconsciously she didn't want to lose him, which she knew would happen once he got back to his world, because you have to remember, she didn't have a destination. She was ripped away from her own world. So she didn't have a destination while Jason did. And so she had become dependent on him, and she was scared of being left. And so the two of them combined, their consciousness, manifested multiple worlds where it was so close to Jason's actual universe, but there was just something always off, like something off about somebody's personality, or the streets names were wrong, or just something was wrong. And they come to realize it was because that the both of their minds were manifesting into one universe. And that also makes you think, it's like, even though this is your world, you are the one steering your own boat, there are so many other influences in your life that also influence what you do. Your parents, your friends, your colleagues, all these people around you, your neighbors, everybody is just has a part in your life. And even though you're the one calling the shots, there's always an outside external factor that can change everything. This is why many people go down so many different paths, because they're influenced by what their parents want, or they saw somebody that they claim as a role model, and so they go through that path. And if that person didn't exist, you would go down another path. And so your life is very dependent on yourself and also your environment. And that was it was a really interesting concept to read about. This is not even a book review anymore. This is just getting very philosophical. These were my thoughts while I was reading the book. That it was very, even though it was so fantastic, so fictional, it's very, very relevant to, just your life and how the world works. And the thing that really got me about this book was towards the end. Jason finally makes it back to his own world. But he gets there and he realizes that he's not the only one who made it back. There are hundreds and hundreds of Jasons in his world right now. And you're probably thinking, what the heck, how is that possible? Through the multiverse, every single decision you make branches off into a new universe. As soon as Jason got into that box the first time to go home, he inadvertently created many, an infinite number of versions of himself. There were Jasons who opened their first door and they didn't get to the snowstorm. They opened their door to a different universe. There were many Jasons who went through the same path as the Jason that we follow in this book. But there was one little hindrance and they branched off into a different universe, a different timeline. And I know I'm explaining this really horribly, but the concept behind it it's very deep. It's very deep because the one thing that once he got back to his universe, he realizes that there's so many of these Jasons in his world now, but who is the true Jason? Who is the original Jason? There's no such thing. Because what happened is that one Jason was uprooted from his universe. This one Jason was taken and he traveled to a different universe. But that one event branched off into multiple different timelines, and now there's multiple different Jasons who at their core are the same exact person. Not even oh, you're the same, the same exact person. They just went through different decisions, different paths through their journey. And so they all get back into this world and they're who gets to live the normal life? Who gets to live the life that they were living before? Because they all, up until the point of kidnapping, up until the point of getting into that box, they were all the same person. There was one Jason. But now, there's hundreds and hundreds. And so it just really, really makes you think your life could go such a drastic way just depending on your actions, just depending on your decisions. And so it makes you think that you really have to be conscious of every decision that you make. Yes, it's important to be spontaneous, but it's also just as important to think through your decisions, because genuinely your life could go so many different ways and you wouldn't even know, because you're just in the same timeline the whole time. You wouldn't even know. So you have to be very wise with your decisions, but you also have to make sure that you're happy. And it's just, it really makes you think. And the only thing I could say is that read this book. It's also a series on Apple TV. Watch it. I don't know if they finished it or if it's a work in progress. I don't know. But I really recommend this book. It really makes you think about your life, and it makes you just zoom out, because the core concept of it is that you get one life and you want to make the most of that life. You want to be doing what makes you happy. You want to be, making smart decisions. You want to be maximizing your time here on earth, because you can't go back and you can't change what you've done and what you've said and what you've decided. And if you could, then that would present so many other problems. If this just sounded like drivel to you, read the book. It might make a little bit more sense. There were a few quotes that I pulled through from here. Mostly from the beginning of the book, because the plot was very heavy. They didn't have time to be very, philosophical. But in the beginning, there were 3 quotes that stood out to me, but I'm going to say one. He said that we all live day to day completely oblivious to the fact that we're a part of a much larger and stranger reality than we can possibly imagine. Because it's true, you just cannot grasp that fact that you are such a tiny speck in this universe. And if the multiverse is true, if it is real, which I do believe in, then what you do does not even matter at all in existence. The only person that your life matters to is yourself. The only person you are making decisions for is yourself. The only person who is being influenced by your environment is yourself. So you have to live not for anybody else, but for yourself. That was deep. Yeah. It was definitely a 5-star read. I loved this book a lot. You can learn so much. It really makes you look back in life, and it really makes you conscious of what your life actually is about and how you're living it. Obviously, one book isn't gonna change your entire outlook on life. It could. This one definitely makes you think, but it's food for thought, Beautiful book, very easy read, beautifully written. The setting is amazing, and there's a lot of scientific concepts too that, may not be entirely factual, but it's just really interesting to read about as well, if you're interested in the physics of it. See, the main premise of it. Are you happy with your life? And that's just something that you keep in the back of your mind when you're reading this book. Keep that quote, "Are you happy with your life?" in the back of your mind. 10 out of 10. I recommend it. This was amazing. Beautiful, beautiful book. It's been a while since I read a book that good. Now I'm not sure what to read next. I'm not in a slump. It got me out of a slump. So, we'll see what's next on the list. Anyways, this was really long. I don't think anybody's actually gonna see this, but it's good to have for on record for me, I guess. But yeah,